Hi, I'm Amy O'Donnell and welcome to month 8 of our Feathered Friends Quilt Along. For those of you who are not supersizing, this will be our last month together working on this quilt. If you are supersizing, then next month will be the last month. We'll have one more video to show you. So for the final month of the people who aren't supersizing, we're going to take the Feathered Friends blocks and the Sawtooth Star blocks that we made, and we're going to combine them into the final pieced border that goes on this quilt. In addition, we're going to be putting on 2 solid borders. So that's what we're going to be doing this month. We're not going to be doing a whole lot of cutting. We are going to be using our strip stick because we have a lot of pressing to do when we assemble this border. And we're going to be using, of course, our rotary cutter, but we're going to need our 22-inch quilting ruler because we have to cut and trim the borders that we're going to be putting on the quilt. Other than that, I think we're ready to go. So hang on and let's get started. Okay, here we are, ready to start putting these fancy borders on the quilt. And you can see I have my strips lined up here on my design wall. You need to lay them out exactly as it is shown in the instructions so that your shading all goes in the right direction. The shading all needs to go in the same direction. It can be left to right or right to left, it doesn't matter, but it needs to be in the same direction. And here's a picture of my quilt after I put the border on the first time, and you can see that some of my shading is not going in the right direction. So I got out my friend the seam ripper and took it apart and fixed it. So in this next slide, you will see that the shading is all going the proper direction. You can see in this picture that the shading of my blocks is correct this time. So it doesn't matter, like I said, if it goes right to left or left to right, or you can do it however you want to do it, but I wanted mine to be shaded properly to get the effect that I wanted. The cutting for this month is relatively simple. We're going to be cutting 11 4.5-inch strips for our 2 borders that we're going to be putting on, and 7 2.5-inch strips for the binding. If you are supersizing, you will need more strips than that for the binding, and that's taken into consideration in your additional fabric requirements. The first thing that we're going to do is put on the wide border that goes around our 9-patch border. And this is just a solid border of fabric. The first thing I did was cut off the selvages. I'm going to miter my seam, and so I lined them up at a 90-degree angle to each other, and then I drew a diagonal line corner to corner. I'm sewing on the diagonal line from corner to corner. I'm trimming with a 1/4-inch seam allowance. I've cut off my seam allowance. I've pressed my seam allowance open, and I'm preparing to attach this to all 4 sides of my 9-patch blocks. You may want to go ahead, or my 9-patch border. You may want to go ahead and make all your borders now if you're in the mood to draw those diagonal lines and trim and press, and then you'll have them all ready. I've sewn on my first wide border. You want to sew it on first on the sides, and then you want to sew it on the top and the bottom. So the sides go on first, and then the top and the bottom. I'm going to measure my strips that I've already sewn together, my Sawtooth Star blocks and my Feathered Friends blocks. I'm going to measure, I've sewn them together as prescribed in the written instructions, and I'm going to measure them to see how long they are. I've got my wide border on. Like I said, I sewed it on the sides first and then the top and the bottom. And I've got my Feathered Friends and my Sawtooth Star blocks pieced together as shown in the instructions. And so now is the kind of tricky part. Since I made my spacer borders a little wider than prescribed, I also have to take that into consideration when putting on these blocks. So now I have to trim that border that I just put on. I need to trim it back so that my next borders will fit. So what I did was I took my ruler and I marked where I need to trim with a heat-soluble pen. And I've marked both the top and the bottom, marked all the way around the quilt. And I'm preparing to make the cut to trim this border down to size. This is just another shot of my border that I've got up on my design wall. You can see where I've marked for trimming. You want to take the same amount off each side, obviously. And now I've made the trim, and I am putting on my first border, and I'm putting it on the side. You may want to lay them out beforehand to make sure you're putting the right border in the right place, going the right direction. Use lots of pins because you're going to want to ease the border on if it's not quite the right size. Maybe your top is a 1/2 inch off from length to width. You want to use lots of pins so you can ease it in. I'm sewing on the border with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I've got my border on, and they all look to be going in the right direction. And I've also put my final border on. So you piece those together the same way we did before. You miter them, press them, and put them on. And so this concludes the non-supersized version of the Feathered Friends quilt. I have really enjoyed being with you guys for this journey, and I'm so excited, and just wait till you see what we have cooking for next year. You're gonna love it. So anyway, have a great day, have a great rest of the year, and those of you who are supersizing, I'll see you again next month. Thanks a lot, everybody. This has been a really special, cool journey for me, and I've totally enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.